The greatest thing from Quebec since Celine Dion and GSP.
A pair of siblings.
A couple of stellar young men.
Two brothers.
These two young men.
Two siblings.
The hard-hitting pair represent Canada.
All right, well, unfortunately, mid-episode, we realized that my phone has shut down, so we don't have any camera for this episode. You won't see my pretty face and that of my interlocutor, but we would like to thank Brian for sending in feedback. So enjoy the episode. Welcome to Thinkin Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. Today we're going to be discussing Plato's famous, infamous, excellent, outstanding Allegory of the Cave. I was just stalling because I didn't know what it was. From chapter 7 of The Republic. 7?
Yep.
And we're also going to be discussing chapter 26 of William James' Principles of Psychology.
Why that laugh, though? So many chapters?
No, it's just like we randomly select a chapter from a good book and we're like, yeah, let's just run it.
And it was good.
It was good, and it was so concrete that I thought we would end up not having much material, but I think it's good. I mean, it's also like 30 pages, so I think that makes up for it. And it's such a pleasure to read. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're going to start with the philosophy side this time because, well, it's going to be shorter probably.
Probably, yeah.
So, you're the explainer guy. Let's explain the allegory.
All right. So for those, I actually learned a couple of things that I didn't know about the Allegory of the Cave by reading this. And we didn't read the chapter in its entirety, but I think what concerns the Allegory of the Cave was in the beginning. But a rough overview of the Allegory of the Cave is that he asks Glaucon to imagine people that are raised in a cave. And from birth, they're tied up, there's a wall behind them, and all they see is a wall in front of them. They're tied up so that their bodies can't move, they really can't look back, and all they can see is the space in front of them, the wall in front of them. And on top of the wall behind them, there are people manipulating figurines and moving them around. The people are hidden behind the wall, but the figurines go above, sort of like puppets. And behind those people, there's a fire, so that the fire projects the shadows of the puppets and the figures on the wall in front of them. So all they can see their whole life, as you can imagine, is those shadows. Now, outside of that cave is, real life with the sun and everything, but the prisoners don't get to see that. And I mean, we'll get more into the specifics, but basically, for those people, that would be their reality. All they would see is the shadows on the wall, and if, they still had control of their voice, they can talk to the people around them who are also tied up and look at the wall. They would discuss reality, and the smartest one would be considered the one that can distinguish the figures the best, and they would make up a whole life about it. But if one day a prisoner were to be unshackled from the chains and go outside, well, then a whole lot of things would happen, which we'll talk about, I guess.
Yeah, my first point was, well, sure, this is ultimately used in a metaphor for explaining who should be the greatest politicians, and the conclusion is that it should be the philosopher king, so it should be philosophers.
Yeah, which I didn't know. I think I both times I saw it, I was introduced to it in a way that's talking about truth, and it's also about that. Yeah, it's like higher forms of truth.
I know. I was just gonna bring that up for like Plato scholars, because ultimately, what is also true is that it's a persistent metaphor through his works. So it's not just about politics. Sure, here it's brought up and articulated the best in a political discussion to argue for, some would use the term enlightened, right? You got to let the enlightened guide, and it doesn't really matter how ludicrous what they are saying sounds, because ultimately, if someone doesn't live in the world of shadows anymore.
Yeah, I guess I have to explain what comes after. So the guy that's unshackled, he would go outside of the cave, and at the beginning, he would maybe even try to get back to the cave because he really wouldn't understand what's going on outside of the cave with,
the light of the sun will literally hurt his eyes, right?
Hurt his eyes because he was in a dark cave and the only source of light was the fire, which he only got indirectly off of the wall. First of all, it would hurt his eyes. Second of all, he would have to adapt to like 3D objects. I thought of that. His whole life, he only sees 2D objects on on a plane, and now he would have to get into that world. So maybe he would even want to get back to the cave, to the shadows, even though it seems reasonable to say that that world is less real. You know, he has access to less things. He knows less.
I'd get back just out of the sheer geometry implications. I didn't like geometry.
You have to learn a whole new dimension. That's too much work.
Wait, what? Like area? No, not just areas. What is it? What's
Volumes.
Volumes? What do you mean? What do you mean volumes?
But so if we took him by force and forced him to live like a week or two in the sun, maybe he would adapt, right? And he would inevitably know more than the shadow people. But then when he got back, he would be out of touch with the shadow skills that he learned before, right? The people distinguish the shadow so well, but his eyes are adapted to the sun, and he's not. His eyes are not adapted to the darkness, and he wouldn't be as good at the skills that those people are good at as he is at, you know, living in our world. And so he would be a laughingstock. People would actually laugh at him probably because he would be less good at specifically what that society values, which is distinguishing the different figures. And, you know, no matter what he does, I think he wouldn't be able to convince them that there's more out there and that he's not a fool, right? Because they don't see that realm.
Yeah.
And that's why you were talking about how a philosopher, well, Plato's metaphor there is that the philosopher is that, but one higher level of abstraction, right? So we live in the cave dwellers' ascended world, in the sun and in the world, and philosophers live one world above that. And so the progression, as I saw it, was sort of truth for them is the fire, and that it's the bringer of truth, and then for us it's the sun. But then for the philosopher, I think he says different things. It's I guess it's virtue, but it's like goodness.
The good, yeah. The good is
justice,
the sun, really.
yeah.
Well, I guess I think there's still a certain unreachability in that realm of the real light, but we're just getting into the specifics of Plato. I'd want to discuss this metaphor just on its applicability to the real world, because ultimately, sure, it was used for the epistemology of virtue, for example, like, oh, the good is the sun and you have to kind of awaken, blah, blah, blah. But let's talk about the implications, because I feel like this is a metaphor that could be used by so many people in our world. Like, for example, you know those trends with awakening your chakra or whatever.
Sure.
Anything, I don't know, philosophy at a very high level, mathematics at a very high level. I don't know who did that, but I think some philosopher assumed God and got a contradiction, and then assumed the non-existence of God and got a contradiction. Something like that, right? Like something that you realize at a very high level. And I wanted to use the term qualitative shift, but that's not necessarily what it is. You just have to get out of the cave. You're still in the same kind of world, right? If we respect the metaphor. So if such people existed today, right? That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Them explaining this other world would be like aliens explaining a fourth dimension to us. That's
Yeah, but I think you can say qualitative shift, because the cave dweller that has been unshackled still lives in the same world, but the people that are shackled truly don't have access to that higher realm, and he does, right? I think the unshackling does do a part. I don't know what the metaphor for unshackling would be for someone in our world that has access to the higher plane, maybe just like through rationality and thinking.
Perhaps. And what's also cool for the metaphor is that the person who gets out of the chains would also see what's causing the perceptions that his prior self had.
Yeah.
And
so he would have a lot of explanatory power. But yeah, I've been reading Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and he talks a lot about incommensurability. So like two things that just cannot, like, two people won't be able to talk at all about what they're talking about because they don't use the same terms. They're not talking about the same thing. Like
a direct response to episode like 7, you wouldn't understand this title.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but they truly wouldn't, and I think it would be hard to sort of bring them over to that side if they don't have access to the same information, right? Like, there's no way for the cave dweller that's been unshackled to give them access to the sun, unless he unshackles them, of course. But while they're sitting there.
Yeah, what's the quote? I forgot who, but the opposite of a truth is a falsity, but the opposite of a deep truth is another deep truth. Somebody said that, probably Kant or some cool guy, and I can certainly see it. It's what I've been realizing for the last 3 years. It's extremely valuable as a grown-up to just be able to converse with fully religious people that aren't even considering the non-existence of God and the scientific explanation for the universe. And then it's also, if the same person can converse on a high level with a scientist, you just gain more, because they're all narratives, they're all metaphors. It doesn't really matter. What ultimately matters, in my opinion, is the results that you instill into this world. And considering the power of the placebo effect, religious mental causes do result in real world consequences, right? And this divine purpose, this quick one-stop fix to the apathy that is plaguing our youth. I feel like a black preacher, but this ultimate thing of you wake up with your little existential Camusian little French philosopher child questions. Oh, does it really matter? Does it? No. Mm-hmm. God, right? I must serve God, and that's it. You have your answer. So all of these things do bring on actual consequences, and it's valuable to have that perspective. So I think I would remain open to the possibility that someone knows not just information that I don't know, but a plane of existence that I don't know. Yeah, we've had a conversation. Maybe it will click for you. But we've had a conversation with someone who thinks in energies. And I genuinely am very quick to dismiss that. Am I wrong for that? I don't know.
I think the way I see it, and now I think we're getting a little bit into what is the truth? Is there a plane of truth that's above everything, or is everything just narratives, as you say? And I think we're all wrong, right? But partially right. And some people, through this sort of perspective taking, as you said, and if you're able to talk to these different people that think in different ways, I think you get access to part truths, because it seems dangerous to me to assert subjectivism. Just seems like a slippery slope to me, and I want to still believe that there is an ultimate truth about things, but I really don't think that humans can 100% not get it in its entirety, right? And one person is never right 100% of the time about everything because they figured it out. But
sorry. If there's anything we can actually get from Descartes, some say it's I think therefore I am, but what it actually is that you don't know. You actually don't know anything. So I think the ultimate conclusion, instead of subjectivism, is as a mature
thinker,
philosopher, human for sure, your opinion must be the following. Have an opinion, a strong one, but also know you're wrong. And it feels counterintuitive, but that's exactly what it's got to be, right? I can come in and I can say, the Buddha is within us all and we are it, and it's partly us, but it's also not whatever. And I can also hear you talking about Jesus and be like, yes, that's exactly what happened. And not out of disrespect, not out of anything like that, but out of the fact that we're both saying the same thing, ultimately. If the two had different consequences, sure. But if you wake up and you have Jesus in mind, and I wake up and I have the Buddha in mind, and we both want to do good in the world, that's it. That's life, right?
Yeah, then again, what is good? It depends on...
Well, converting others through no matter what force is necessary, obviously. So Do you want to alternate points? Do you have like a specific point? Because I have other points.
You can go with your point. I have one more point, I think.
Okay, my next point is, how exactly should you treat the unawakened? And the initial, I think maybe it's not the initial intuition, but it's perhaps the initial human reaction that one would have after coming out of the realm of the shadows. And it would be to laugh at the people that were once that are in the situation that you were once in. Because humans adapt so fast and you forget so fast. I believe in a month into just like going around and playing with 3D objects and be like, well, this is awesome, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then like inventing geometry, you would feel like a god, right?
Right.
And to a certain extent, with my recent development of, focus and but the loss of these other distractions, I genuinely went through, as we said, right, a phase where it went worse before it got better. Because I look at the people who can't stop scrolling. Like, I was working a shift, and these two guys, it's like God put them in front of me. I'm not even joking when I say that. It's these two 23-year-old guys who are just talking about how tomorrow they were going to change everything and they were going to stop messing around with their thing. And while we had a break from work, they were scrolling on their phone and like watching a football match while scrolling on TikTok. And he was saying, like, he was telling the other guy's story, who was his friend, about how he told his girlfriend he needed to open some type of bank account, like, you've opened those, for some savings bank account.
Yeah.
He told his girlfriend twice, and in that span of time, she opened the bank account before him. And then he still hadn't when we were talking, and it had been like a month. And all these other things, all these like, oh man, I just I think the guy ordered a calendar,
An agenda. Yeah.
through Amazon, and he was waiting for it, and he was like, yeah, when it comes, man, like, I'm gonna be so and I wanted to laugh at them, and I did, in their face. but then I came home, and what's been really, really helping me, I think I've said it on the podcast, is this metaphor of a mirror. Everything you hate, it's like it's designed to show you a reflection of what you are afraid to become. And heck yeah, if I am to be those guys in a year, I would indeed hate myself. And therefore, what the ultimate conclusion of the text and mine is, not grammar, but it's all good, is that you should pity them in a way. Like, not necessarily in the most negative sense of the word, but
yeah, it's a Christian idea, right?
Yeah.
Take on. That's what Jesus did. He took everyone's sins on himself, because all of humanity, we're all flawed, and everyone is just your flaws shown to you.
Yeah, and this I do find this to be a slippery slope, because if you take on the idea that Phil introduced and the kind of religious idea,
I don't know what the implications are for that. Like, what?
I can tell you what they are. I've thought about it.
Okay.
Nothing is anyone's fault. Like, everyone's actions.
Think so.
I think it is, because everyone's actions are just a product of their environment. Oh, you.
I think the point. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Like, someone steals from a bank, right? Either we live in a world where people don't have enough money to, have what they want, of what they need, sorry. Or that person was above that threshold and they're evil. But what evil means is that the idea that more equals better was instilled into them. But by whom? Society. And then nothing is anyone's fault, because you have to kind of look at it through the lens of, okay, well, this person did this horrible thing, but why? The why? And you regress towards, because the world made them do it. And that's what I don't want to end up with.
I think it's not. It's about forgiving.
Well, when someone asks, how many times should you forgive a man? What did Jesus say?
What did he say?
I don't know, like 7,777 times, something like that. I'm not joking. This is an actual quote.
Is the idea that it's too many times for one lifetime, so like you're gonna forgive everyone like all the time?
I think it's that you should always forgive people.
Okay, no, but I think it's about forgiveness, but more importantly, it's about understanding. I think, and I see this like when people do questionable things, is I can imagine a world where imagine everything goes wrong in your life, or everything aligns itself to make you do that thing that person just did. That situation is imaginable, I think. Like, there is a world in which my experiences and my environment are so bad that I'm driven to do this thing. That's possible. And so you can't assume, I guess, not knowing the person, that that's not what happened. Because if you were in that imagined world, that's exactly what you would have done. And so what can you do? But then after talking to the person and knowing it's for the wrong reasons, I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's a golden mean situation, because if I can imagine myself, it's all about the theory of mind, right? To what extent can I imagine? Like, I often beep on you for, not making the scheduled podcast time for some reason, right? But you actually have good reasons sometimes. But if I were to put myself in the shoes of, I know a friend is good at video editing, right? I just recorded my screen while gaming, and I really want to publish my first gaming video online. And I ask him, hey, please, this is important for me. Can you please edit my gaming video in 2 days? And he says, yes, it will be done in 2 days. And I make announcements on my social media channels. It will be out in 2 days. And then he doesn't make a deadline. And then, okay, sure. Somehow I get access to the knowledge that he himself was gaming or watching videos, or just lost the time that he was going to invest into that. Well, where's the forgiveness and understanding there? And I think it's certainly not somewhere where we would apply this kind of forgiveness / understanding theorem. But if you were to take it to the extreme in the way that I said at the beginning, well, we do live in a society where cheap entertainment is at your fingertips. You understand? Like,
Yeah,
if you want
I
to push it,
understand, but
everything is forgivable.
I mean, I think the situation you put out is pretty extreme, but in situations like that,
But it's so realistic, though. It's not.
well, when you said it's really important for me, can you do it by 2 days? And he says, yes, it will be done in 2 days. It's like pretty categorical. And I mean, I guess it does happen, but more often than not, it's just like there's a deadline, and then the person doesn't do it, or does it a day late. But what I was gonna say is, haven't you ever not done something purely because of laziness? You have, so like you can see.
I would say less than 50%, though. I understand these things happen.
Less than 50%.
I think less than 50% of cases have good reasons for me not coming up with something at the deadline. Like, there was an hour or two out there that I could have not slept. There was an hour or two out there that I could have not, taking that break from that work. If I'm honest with myself, maybe that's a personal thing. But all I wanted to say with the friend thought experiment is that at some point, the Jesus forgiving becomes impractical, right? That's all it comes down to. You can't go through life just being like, I'm so sorry. Imagine they don't make the deadline and you're like, I'm so sorry the world made you do this, my child.
Right. Yeah,
put your hand on their forehead or something.
Well, ultimately, what happened to Jesus after doing all that is that they killed him. So
yeah,
it's probably impractical if you want to like succeed by the standards of society. Yeah. Anyway, let's not get into religion.
Yeah, well, we definitely did. Okay, pity. Okay, then there's this final idea. And it's the fact that you don't instill the light in anyone. You don't bring it to anyone. You make them turn toward it. And that I can certainly relate to. In Buddhism, I've talked about this for sure. The word of the law is written within your soul. It's in your heart already. And this is exactly what the metaphor with a coin flip does, right? Flip the coin, close it. Well, before it lands, you already know the thing that your heart is telling you to do. And it's usually two things. The better thing for you in the long run, the harder thing to do, right? That's it. You know, we've summarized it all. That's it. Take your decisions. If it's the hardest thing to do and the best for you in the long run, go do it. But it's obviously not that simple, and we never do that, and we self-sabotage. The beauty of this, I think religion puts its finger onto it. Any religion, Buddhism, Christianity, I think Socrates had it figured out. It's within us all. And that has a certain value. It has a certain additional value that I feel like it's if I were to doubt that science can explain it all, that would be it. You know, all these philosophers do, you know, we always talk about this. Like Kant just being like, oh, you should, I don't know, betray
rationally arriving at morality.
Exactly. And then it never works out. But why? What doesn't it work out toward? And it's ultimately our intuition. And what is our intuition? That word of God, but it's also, it can never really be spelled out. That's why philosophy hasn't reached the philosophy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, how do you, because I can easily reconcile that with my worldview, but how do you reconcile that with thinking that, like, people aren't basically good if everyone has that internal compass?
I'd say, you're talking to me specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, there are only two of us in the room, but...
Can I? Yeah, a coffee. One black coffee, please.
Thank you. But, you know, there's this Buddhist quote that says, a good judge trusts the good and bad of human nature. And that's ultimately what I'm aspiring toward. And if I do see the world as a reflection of myself, guess what? In the years where I would have confidently said that the world is a bleak place full of bad people, is when I probably was one to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm moving towards this, trusting the good and bad of human nature. That's all it is to it. That's all there is to it. That's
what Nietzsche said. Nietzsche said that all philosophy ever is just, sort of philosophers writing their worldview and how they see the world onto a paper and then ad hoc rationally explaining it away, you know?
Exactly. And it's also the thing they say about authors, right? The story, the characters say more about the writer than the characters themselves. So, you know, I do believe that to a certain extent, maybe not to the extent of living in a cave and seeing shadows versus seeing the world of 3D objects and reality and virtue and good. I think there is something like that in the world. And I have a perception of what it is too, but that's why I do. I mean, this was one of the arguments I used in the fact that Plato is my favorite. Socrates is my favorite philosopher, right? The Allegory of the Cave is just so powerful. Powerful for epistemology, politics, navigating the world, just understanding that the people who don't know that they don't know, but you know that thing, they deserve pity and not hate or laughter.
Yeah, so I think the practical thing to get out of this is stop that laughter knee-jerk reaction and see if you're just operating in the wrong worldview, right? And if you can sort of shift yourself to their perspective and maybe they know more than you.
Yeah, and ultimately, as an added twist, if I may, you might be the shadow person or you might be the light person, but you'll never actually know because both, the instinct of both is to laugh at the other. That's
definitely,
the thing.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
the thing.
And you can't convince the shadow person, really.
Exactly. Except by turning them from within themselves. And that's, and the way we're going to do that is in the next episode.
Yeah.
Solving
the best, one addition that would make the metaphor even better is like if the only way they could unshackle themselves, well, the only way they could unshackle is if they unshackled themselves.
Oh, it was never closed on their wrists.
Yeah.
They just sat there. It's so good.
Yeah.
Hey, Plato, You're welcome. We
I mean,
made it better.
Also, what about all the sensitive and critical periods of development where they're like all their muscles atrophied and they can't walk? But I'm sorry.
It happens. It happens. Okay. Well, I'm giddy.
You're giddy.
I'm giddy, and that's rare because we are reading William James. Okay.
Have
Now-
we talked about William James before? We have talked about him,
We've
but
certainly talked about it, and I even
repeatedly.
Yeah, repeatedly, and I even used a kid voice to say the name William James in the last episode. But the funny thing about him, and the more I advance in life, the more I start to believe that I truly do have a gift at reading people from the slightest impulse. And we last time we talked about this was in early episodes, probably in judging, when I was just like, yeah, pretty much in the first conversation, you can kind of tell everything about a person. Now, you might agree with this for the people who ooze of virtue.
We know.
Yeah, we know. If you know, you know. And
Only we know.
no, somebody else knows.
Okay.
And also the other thing, maybe you'll get more used to this idea. It doesn't matter. I do believe so. And the cool thing is, the way I was exposed to William James, I had known nothing about him, was when our professor introduced us to a paragraph by William James that insulted Rousseau, I think, right? Just a French
Wilhelm
psychologist.
Wundt.
Yeah, probably Wundt.
Yeah.
First, but then Rousseau.
Yeah,
Oh,
both,
no. That wasn't another thing, but yeah. And his biggest rival, Wilhelm Wundt. And it was just a paragraph, and he was critical of psychology, which obviously spoke to me, and he used beautiful language, and it was good roasts.
I mean, just such a good writer and
Yeah,
clearly so smart. Like
I think we just clicked. That's the thing.
I think we just.
I just think we just clicked. Not because I appreciate good writing, because it's the specific thing the philosophers are trying to do, right? Put whatever happens in here in our hearts onto a paper. And good writers do this, and I've said this for a long time.
Do you know when the book was published?
I don't know, late 1800s. I don't know.
Probably late 1800s. And so, the chapter we read from is a
It's
chapter
about memory. We didn't even say. I think I said
Yeah.
26. I didn't say
Yeah.
about memory.
It's about memory. It's from, what is it called? The Elements of Psychology?
The principles of psychology.
The Principles of Psychology, which is, I think it's fair to describe as just William James describing everything we know up to that date about psychology, and seemingly successfully so. And like,
No, it's just not up to that date. He described the next 100 years of research. And Dave says this.
Some of the research he mentions there, we did learn in our psych classes too. Ebbinghaus, another one.
He tends to name drop, but you were always enough for me, William James. You don't need to quote anyone.
Yeah, sometimes it is like half a page or a page of someone else talking, and he's like, I can't say it better than this person, and it works so well. Like, he's such a good writer.
Yeah, he really is. So, for the practical part, I mostly took note of the ways to make memory better.
Sure.
We can skip the first 10 pages of what a memory is. I don't think it's that relevant, and we can go straight into explaining what it can't do, what you can't do with it. And what William James is against is the idea that memory as a faculty, like
the tenacity of
exactly that word,
the initial the tenacity of
innate
memory.
let's just call it an innate tenacity. He has a
but what we mean by
specific
tenacity is like the tenacity of the idea staying in your mind. So he thinks that it changes for every person, but also for age. So throughout a life it changes. But we all have an innate tenacity with which ideas stay in our mind. Some people are naturally more forgetful, and they need to revise things more so it stays in their mind. And some people, for some people, the memory just gets engraved in their mind from the first time, and they remember well instantly.
Yeah, and then he says the people who don't have great recall will never be men of influence, and that just broke my heart.
And also clearly hinting at the fact that he's a man of great influence that has great recall. I don't know if clearly, but that's the impression I got.
It wasn't when I read
Okay,
it, but
okay.
it might be the subtlest flex.
Which I don't thinking about everything I know about memory. My Psych 100 teacher is a memory researcher. So like we had like 3 lectures on it, and he sort of described his research, which I think is I think his research and his perspective on forgetting is like out of the norm of modern research, which is pretty cool. But I don't remember anything about like innate ability
Well, then you
to
didn't
remember.
learn much, did you?
No, I remember working memory, and that we have different capacities of working memory, which just means like the items that I can keep in mind currently, and how much I can keep, and that's correlated with IQ too. So like, you know, the magic 7 number that thrown around in psychology is that if I'm learning a list right now, the average number that people can learn is 7. But like if you have a bigger,
I can do 14.
yeah, if you have a bigger working memory and you have 14, then good for you. But about memories staying better for some people, I'm not sure. But I think he's more pessimistic than, well, I don't know if he's more pessimistic than necessary, but with practice, even people with low idea tenacity can remember things, you know?
Yeah, exactly. He just doesn't agree with the mechanism with which that happens. And I think it has interesting implications in the way that you would go about it. Because
Right.
one thing he does say is that, I'll read a few paragraphs, but one thing he says is, okay, spoiler alert, the ultimate conclusion is it's not the recalling that gets better, is your attention that you're investing into the things that you're trying to recall eventually throughout the day gets better.
Your strategy for encoding.
Exactly. You're attending to things more, you're rethinking about them, you're repeating them more, all of these things. Your memory doesn't actually get better. So essentially, what is not going to be a good strategy is, for example, just being like, okay, well, as much as, I don't know, my flexibility is important for me and therefore I will do stretching, every night I'm going to try to remember a list of things, and the next day I'm going to try to recall it, and that's going to keep my memory intact. Not how it works, essentially. You're going to get better at memorizing those things.
Yeah, but it's going to keep my memory intact. Do you mean to say it's going to improve my memory capacity?
I guess what I meant by intact was not decline with age, which is essentially improving. Like, it's the same thing.
No, that's what I was going to say though. You can, like, doing things with your brain and challenging yourself does delay the decay of brain deterioration. That's the only thing, because like what I was gonna say is, like, some people in there argue that when you're a kid your recall is gonna be better, or for those memories from childhood your recall is gonna be better because everything is new and like more vivid. But let's say from like 18 to, I don't know, 50, it stays pretty stable, but then it declines. But like I can't quote any research articles, but I feel like what I would say is work, like doing brain teasers and working, and, you know, being active in general, but also specifically like for, you know what I'm saying? Like it does delay decline.
I do. I think you may be right. I may be misremembering, but essentially for our interests, the faculty of memory, whatever that means, I guess your brain's capacity for it, at least in the younger age, isn't going to be improved by such exercises. So let me read a little paragraph. I have a few. The secret of a good memory is thus the secret of forming diverse and multiple associations with every fact we care to retain. But this forming of associations with a fact, what is it but thinking about the fact as much as possible? Briefly then, of two men with the same outward experiences and the same amount of mere native tenacity, that's what it was, the one who thinks over his experiences the most and weaves them into systematic relations with each other will be the one with the best memory. Extremely interesting. So this whole thing we've been doing here is thinking. It wasn't. No, but you know what? Like, I've always said I've had bad memory and whatnot. But
yeah,
just the other day, I mean, actually this morning, so I already forgot, but whoops. In class, we were talking about an epistemology paper of knowing about yourself. Self-knowledge. We did one of those. It was another thing about what's called first person authority. And it's essentially the fact that if you tell me Jessica is feeling down, I'm going to ask you, how do you know that? And you're going to be like, well, her eyes, and she wiped her makeup. I don't know what girls do. And then if you say, I'm sad, right? You as
Right.
you, I'm not going to ask you, what evidence do you have of this? And that's the first person authority. Doesn't matter. And what I found cool with that is that I associated it with Thomas Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat? Because I was going to say, you need to be a human. The conversation shifted towards that kind of, but I reminded myself that to describe the phenomenology of a bat, you need to be a bat, right? A bat scientist. The objective is attained through the subjective. And this was relevant to our conversation. So, but I've always had bad memory. And I've always thought, I've told you about this. The reason I don't like reading is within a month, I might as well not have read the thing. I don't know what happens to these things. Last semester, I started attending to classes.
Right.
And, mapping, even this semester already, mapping things onto the things I learned in history of psychology. We start somewhere. I'm like, oh, right. He was reacting to that. Oh, right. Behaviorism. Right. So it's funny because I thought my memory was bad. I mean, I would certainly say that it's worse than the average, but now I'm thinking about papers and even, how I always struggle for words. I know
we know this.
Yeah, that we know, but
go to Thinkin Bros Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube to go see our best short yet.
Clip. Yeah, and but I can tell you the name of, for example, the first episode, right? Because 1, I took time to find it. 2, I found it funny. 3, I've probably recommended it to some people. 4, I've probably re-swiped on. Yeah, so essentially,
the first episode of what?
Our podcast.
Our podcast.
Don't not judge others. And if you think about it, this was 7 months ago, and
you would have never remembered that.
No,
yeah.
honestly, what did I yesterday? Yeah, okay, I actually know, but it's because I eat once a day. Anyway, it's all easy. Start to care. Well, that's another thing. Actually, that's another second component, the emotional one. But start to think about the things that matter to you, right? And here's the thing that I do have, and it might be linked to my insecurity with memory. I feel like this podcast, well, this episode is a little bit more ADHD than all the other ones. I'm not gonna lie.
When you're talking, yeah, it is.
Certainly. So, and it's this aversion, this mental block that I have to rehearsing things. I don't know if you have it as well. It might be a thing where I'm so inconfident in my memory that sometimes I just tell myself, I'm not going to remember it anyway. Why go through the effort?
I can sort of see that. I don't know in what context you're remembering by heart, but I had oral presentations last semester, and yeah, I didn't learn any text by heart. I just said I knew the rough points, and I knew I could improvise. I don't know, develop on those points adequately on the spot.
Well, so with the ADHD, there's this thing where you feel like you absolutely don't know anything at any point in time. And I've told you about the system of like retrieving information from my brain. You know how I have to go through the chain?
Yeah.
Through general chain. For example, right, if I see a rat, right? Before the word rat comes to mind, Alex has to like guide me through what the animal kingdom is, then rodents, then rats, right?
I actually go through the genus, the family.
Right. He does he starts with Darwin's history, family history. So essentially that's how my brain works. And a specific example of me kind of having this aversion to repeating things is last semester's exams. You know how before every exam I was like, I'm gonna fail.
Yeah.
I ended up getting 91, and I know I think for some it's an insecurity thing. For me, it's because it's the first time I've tried, so that's what it was. Now, before the exam, I had this aversion to once the papers had been put down. Right when I decided, okay, this is my last study session, and let's say I still had 20 minutes before the papers were distributed. It genuinely would have helped to, those lists of 10 things, or a specific person like William James, like whatever he did, right? Imagine I had forgotten the principles of psychology during the exam, but if I had rehearsed it in my own head because I had just read it and put the paper down, it would have clicked because I wouldn't have just thought about the time I remembered it, but also about the time that I thought about it afterwards. Anyway.
I don't exactly get your point, but that goes to another point they make there that...
Yeah. Oh, hooking it with the most... yeah, so if a memory was a fish, I'd say... Let's just go with this, okay? If a memory was a fish, the most hook, line, and sinkers... What's the term?
Sure, dude.
No. What's the term? Fish...
Wait, what are you looking
rod.
for?
Fish rod.
Oh, fishing rod.
Fishing rod. It's...
hook, line, and sinker.
Hook, line, and sinker. The more fishing rods you put in water, the more chance when push comes to shove and you need to retrieve the fish.
For better or for worse.
For better or worse until death do us part. Like the mechanisms...
You have more chances.
The mechanisms are gonna be there for you to remember what you wanted to remember. What? So, no, but this is this is a mechanism, a specific mechanism to put in place, and it's essentially mapping anything you want to remember if you are serious about it. If you are serious about it. It's mapping anything you want to remember onto systems.
You just... Why did you talk about fish?
No, because that's how it works. That's what a system is.
Yeah, but the viewer... Like, I sort of understand what you're talking about. The viewers have no idea. What do you mean?
Okay, let's say you're learning... No, let's say you're learning about a new concept, right? Like the concept of apple. And so when you see an apple... You really like it's very important for you to remember that is called an apple. Well, first of all, you would learn what an apple tree is and try to remember that the tree of that is called an apple tree. Then you would try to learn about the colors and the way kids learn colors, and to say that apples are red. Oh, that's another way I can map onto that concept. And essentially, if you create this system of 10 fishing rods around the concept of apple, the time you're going to want to retrieve it, even if 9 fail, you're going to get to the concept of apple.
Right, because if you pull one, then by association, like the actual apple gets pulled. And so it's a network of retrieval.
Exactly. So thinking, and in your thinking, you might set it up in this systematic way.
I was going to say before we change subjects, that what do you think about this? Like, why does there need to be an innate tenacity? What proof is there for innate tenacity? Can it not be that some people
care more about the world?
Exactly. Just from the beginning, create more associations, and that their innate tendency is to create more association. Does there need to have? Does there need to be an innate tenacity to things, or are just some people are some people just good naturally at it, and then some people need to learn? Because the end result is that the people who don't have tenacity do learn the things.
I would say, I think if you look at the extremes, it's hard to support that. You know those people who can just recall any dates? Like, who cares about dates? Genuinely, no one ever cares about dates. And I know that those people will probably go through the additional effort of waking up and looking at what day it is, right? Even to retrieve the day of today, it would take me a little bit of time. So
the only way I'm thinking about it is that I have a friend who's in a lot of my psychology classes, and she instantly after class doesn't remember the stuff we talked about, and I can remember it for the exam later. Like you, I need to like go through a pathway to remember it, because like I can't just say, oh, this is what we talked about at this time, because that's useless. I have a network of ideas, and I think the difference between me and her is not innate tenacity of the ideas. It's just that while the teacher is talking about this specific subject, I currently, while she's talking about it, have 6 links in my head where, oh, in this class I talked about this, and this links up with this, and this links up with this. This is useful for my life, or, oh, how is she going to follow this up? And then I think of how she may follow this up. And so I set up those hooks. It's not necessarily that just I go into it raw and I'm just like, I will remember this and I make no associations. I think they're so intertwined that I have difficulty separating them.
100%. I think both are true. I think the value of both can't be undermined because some people actually don't care about certain things and they remember them. And I actually don't care about certain things and I absolutely don't remember them. And also the things I care about, I don't remember them. So, just off of that. But I do think that systems are extremely important. And tell me if this rings a bell and if this is the stick that breaks the camel's back for you understanding my concept. And it's the fact that, have you ever kind of created that system and then you don't remember certain information? It might be class information. And then because that system is internally consistent, you can deduce what that information would be just from your system. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if for example, you don't remember a quote by someone and you have to place a quote and you know that, for example, William James is a good writer and the quote is also written well in the way that you read it, you would say, okay, in my internal system of the history of psychology, the best writer is William James, and this quote is written masterfully, so it must be William James, something like that.
I think I can't bring up to mind exactly what you're talking about or like an example, but I'm sure I've done that. Yeah.
The more complete and kind of internally consistent your system is, you're gonna excel at things for sure.
What's crazy to think about when I have classes about memory, I think about this is like that means it's like a Pareto distribution, right? Some people at the beginning of the distribution just like don't have networks in their brain and they don't have anything at all. And some people make like to be a little bit good at remembering something, you need to make so many links and so much networking that it increases exponentially. And at the far end of the distribution, you just have people who have so many links with so many things, I guess in specific subjects also, because those people don't have such good knowledge about other subjects. But what's going on in the brains of people that like don't remember stuff and don't know stuff? I guess now we know it's just like the neuronal connections are not strong.
But that's the added mystery, because it's the chicken or the egg, right? Because
it's always the chicken or the egg.
It really is, but it's also like that for math. That's the big question, Is it your innate math ability that gives you the tricks that you might have? Or is it the tricks that you have that make you good at math? Because, some kids, we've done tutoring. And for some kids, to know the multiplication table of 12, like times 12, they actually learn it instead of doing times 10 and then times 2 and then adding those two things.
I think in general, though, kids, that's the way they do it.
I know that's how you learn in the beginning, but those people that like even 2 years later, when you're actually doing, I said actually doing math, but whatever, when you get to algebra and whatnot, if you're equipped with those tricks, right? If in your brain, 8 plus 4 isn't 12 because you learned it, but it's 8 plus 2 plus and 2, then whatever, plus 2, right? You see the puzzle pieces in your mind and they move. Is it because you had a better innate math ability, or were you taught those mental tricks? And that's certainly a conundrum. And science isn't really closer to answering that than William James was. Here's another quote for all our students out there. The reason why cramming is such a bad mode of study is now made clear. I mean by cramming that way of preparing for examinations by committing points to memory during a few hours or days of intense application immediately preceding the final ordeal. Little or no work having been performed during the previous course of the term. Things learned thus in a few hours, on one occasion, for one purpose, cannot possibly have formed many associations with other things in the mind. The brain processes are led into by few paths, and are relatively little liable to be awakened again. Speedy oblivion is the almost inevitable fate of all that is committed to memory in this simple way. If that doesn't convey the pleasure of reading William James, nothing will. Well, I'm exaggerating. There are better quotes. And that's the beauty of it. I'm going to try to circle towards the next quote, but
do we even need to talk about it? It makes so much sense and it's so true. And what else?
No. I just wanted to mention it. This was like kind of the conclusion of the thinking part and the hook, line, and sinker part of the conversation. So we can put those aside, put a pin in them.
Finally.
So this is where he brought up the example of a person who had struggled with memory, and that every single day he made a pact with his wife to tell the events of his day to her in the most, detailed way possible. And he did this for 50 years, and he swears by the fact that this improved his memory. And instead of the practice growing irksome, it may become a pleasure to go over again the events of the day. I am indebted to this discipline for a memory of somewhat unusual tenacity, and I recommend the practice to all who wish to store up facts or expect to have much to do with influencing men. But William James, and when someone comes up with this and says, in my last 50 years, I've tried this experiment and it completely revolutionized my life. I think the courage to say you're wrong about that mechanism is the courage required is so great, but it feels right according to everything else he's saying. And essentially he says, no, you didn't improve your memory. You just improved attendance to the facts of your day. You were more present in your day. And I mean, realistically, if I were to choose one path or the other towards, developing a better memory, attending to facts, first of all, intuitively feels more efficacious. And second of all, it's something I'm willing to do instead of like recalling my day every night. But it's also a way to get to it, right? It's all paths that are leading to, the Rome of it.
Yeah, but also, did you, for the next 50 years, he had to, be married at 20, made a pact with his wife, and then for the next 50 years, so now he's 70.
And written this at,
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, you need to, attention is a big factor in James's whole text. It's really about what you pay attention to, and he really doesn't get into it that much. Well, no, he does say, most things are dropped into oblivion, right? And most things are not attended to, but if you want to recall them, you need to pay attention to them.
Yeah, and selectivity is a cool property of the brain, and it's, forgetting is actually something that the brain is usually blamed for, but the reason it has to do that is to keep the machine efficient and forget 99% of the information that you don't need to attend to anyway. So selectivity is kind of a blessing and a curse. And here he concludes this section by saying, all improvement of memory consists, then, in the improvement of one's habitual methods of recording facts. Extremely interesting. Honestly, I've been blaming my memory for a while now for the way that I live, let's say. And it might just be that the systems that I have in place and the care that I bring to them is insufficient.
Yeah, because the thing is, if you do multiple things with this podcast, as you do, and you have to, come up with the name of the podcast and edit it the whole time and then post it, make sure it's posted, you look at it multiple times, then you're going to remember it, and you do remember it. But if you don't have memory for a class you don't attend and see once, then it's no wonder.
Yeah.
Practical?
Well, are we done?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay.
I was asking.
I mean, we can ask. I'd say, well, he also points out the validity of certain mental tricks. I do this all the time to make up for whatever. I mean, I had it right there.
Oh.
So there's this associating alphabet letters to numbers, and he gives the alphabet, well, the associations, and then he says, to briefly show its use, suppose that it is desired to fix 1142 feet in a second as the velocity of the sound. TTRN are the letters and order required. Fill up with the vowels forming a phrase, like tight run, and connect it with some such flight of the imagination as that if a man tried to keep up with the velocity of sound, he would have a tight run. When you recall this a few days later, great care must be taken not to get confused with the velocity of light, nor to think that he had a hard run, which would be 3,000 feet too fast.
We should say the alphabet. 1 is T, and then...
Yeah, 4 is R, 2 is N. Essentially, whatever. So, mental tricks to...
Wait, you do that? You do that sort of stuff?
I don't do... I mean,
okay,
I don't do number things. I do a lot of just stupid, silly jokes. I do a lot of silly jokes.
What I do, I think I've told you this, but my way of remembering east and west, if it's right or left, is that I think in my mind, west is more like dominant. It's a longer word. It sounds more right than east, and so I think that west is to the right.
Yeah.
And then I have to tell myself, no, that's wrong. It's to the left. And
Okay,
so I have to think of like the I have to go through the correct rationale and then think of the opposite, and then I know I'm right.
I see. It would take longer for me to write something with my left hand, therefore the longer word is on the left. So it's very similar. But stuff I would do for class would be like, if Wundt is, associated with psychology, like a founder of something, I wouldn't want to associate with him. Like something like that, right?
Okay, yeah.
Just like tricks like that, I would probably sooner remember my silly trick than the actual information the prof has given me. So, okay. Next shift is, I guess, if number one was thinking and placing things into systems, this is the quote: "The attention which we lend to an experience is proportional to its vivid or interesting character." And you underlined here, exciting emotionally. And of course, extreme examples are given for extremely scary situations, right? This is very, very well known. When adrenaline is pumping, you're going to remember every single detail. But I guess on a more practical level, you could develop acknowledging feelings for something, or developing feelings for something.
I mean, I think this is partly what you're doing with your jokes. If you're laughing while you're doing it, and if you're getting enjoyment out of it, you're going to remember it better.
Fair point. I'd say, I just feel like this could be done on a deeper level. I know that depression leads to kind of a loss of memory of some sort.
Of the good things. I know that when you're in a depressive state, you attend to things that fit that schema, and you remember things that fit that schema. So it's like
But I think there are some general memory effects as well.
Okay.
And I think it just makes sense for me. If nothing is important, then you're not going to remember anything.
Right. So yeah, when you're thinking about something and you want to remember it, just think of like your cat dying, and
absolutely. Sorry, Mittens. Next quote: "As every sensation tends to revive in its image, the sensation twice repeated will leave after it a double tendency. That is, provided the attention be as great as the second time, as great
the second time
as the first. Usually this is not the case. For the novelty diminishing, the interest diminishes. But if other circumstances renew the interest, or if the will renovates the attention, the incessantly increasing tendency will incessantly increase the chances of the resurrection and integrity of the image." So I think what this is saying is that if the principle of novelty and memory didn't exist, I guess in memory didn't exist, then every single time you think about a thing, it would have the same kind of value of chance of you remembering it afterward as the first time.
Yeah. I think this places the emphasis on attention too, right? Because the reason novelty matters is because novelty makes you pay attention more. And the second time, it's not novel, so you don't pay attention to it. But he says, if we forget novelty, and if you pay attention truly to the thing as you did the first time, it would have the same value as the first time you saw it. And the first time you see something, that's a big step from 0 to maybe I'm going to remember it. And if that second time you put a same step, that's pretty good. Just not speaking English.
No, but yeah, well, are you talking about me quoting? Or? Okay, so thinking is important, emotion is important, and I would say focus. I don't want to place them in a system like, I don't know, your focus improves the thinking and the emotion, but yeah, those things are all important. Now, I had this phrase memorized that I thought at the end of this thing. After all we've discussed, maybe we have some more, but you might tell yourself, well, this is nothing new. This is pretty much what we know. But that is precisely the point. In the late 1800s, this guy knew everything we know now. That's what it comes down to.
I feel like I could just read through the principles of psychology carefully and just find infinite experiments that are going to be found to be true that haven't been done.
Exactly. There are some chapters of this book that give kind of a combination of an actual experiment that could be run and my thought experiments, where he kind of proves a point. For example, like imagine an infant that was never taught to walk and kept down until 2 months after he's supposed to have the first reflex to walk. What is going to happen to that infant in 10 years? Like he
Plato
talks,
could never.
Why?
Allegory of the cave, they're kept there from birth, and
like he'd keep it the whole time.
No, I mean he would think they can walk.
Whatever. So that's one thing. Yeah, attending to details, hooking them onto concepts, develop system, repetition. He has this little model of if you want, for example, let's say you're a waiter, but you're a careless waiter, and you know you have to cover your tables with tablecloths. Wow. Retrieve that, but every time you've forgotten. So how would you go about it? Essentially, the cue that you want to activate tablecloth is table. So I guess you would have to kind of strengthen the link between a table and tablecloth and kind of work at it. But what's the third thing? I'm not sure. I forgot.
I'm not sure though. I think the examples this is bringing to mind for me is the guy tying his handkerchief, right, to remember something. That's what you're talking
throwing
about.
I think in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, he had this trick of throwing your pillow the night. Well, as you're going to sleep, throw your pillow to the other side of the room, and when you wake up and ask yourself why it's there, you can remember whatever you wanted to remember last night. Like if you're like, oh, I have this math thing that I have to do before the math class in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Throw your pillow to the other side of the room, you're gonna remember because it's a weird thing.
Yeah,
cool.
So I mean, I don't know. What the waiter could do is just like put something in the center of the table, like a neon green candle, and then he's gonna be like, what's the neon green candle doing in the middle of the table? And that's, you did that with the intention of reminding yourself later that you would have to put the tablecloth.
So maybe the link, there are two links, right? Link the neon to the tablecloth and then the tablecloth to the table. But because you can't ever link the tablecloth to the table, you have to introduce that third element in some way.
So it's just a link, and then you'll always do it. Eventually, you'll learn.
Exactly. So, for example, if I wanted really to remember that the Principles of Psychology was written by William James, I would need a third element that I could associate with Principles of Psychology, like William James, W.J., Walt Disney Jr., Mickey Mouse. I don't know. I would go down some rabbit hole and try to dig something out. So here's the thing.
Principles of Psycholojames.
Principal William.
Principilliam of
Psycholojames. Okay, so there's this phenomenon of déjà vu.
Oh right, yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had it, man, but like I used to have it a lot more, which makes me think that it's associated to a certain dysfunctional character. I don't think it's a good thing to have, but I think I had one recently. I don't know. And okay, here's the description. There's a curious experience which everyone seems to have had, the feeling that the present moment in its completeness has been experienced before. We were saying just this thing in just this place to just these people. This sense of pre-existence has been treated as a great mystery and occasioned with much speculation. Dr. Wigan considered it due to a dissociation of the action of the two hemispheres, one of them becoming conscious a little later than the other, but both of the same fact. Pretty good theory, but I'm pretty sure it's disproven the sentence after. But it's really weird. It's actually like a mental state that just takes over you, and then you feel every second that something happens, right? For example, if you started talking, every word you would say, the moment it's over, I would tell myself, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. And it's really weird.
For me, often it's the person already said something, and maybe in the future, like the future sentence is a bit too, but I stop and I look around and I'm like, I look at the other people there and I'm like, guys, this, like, were you there when this happened? Exactly this happened?
We've heard this song before. Yeah, then he talks about some technical aspects of the famous in his time researcher that did the forgetting curve, I think, right?
Wait, but James's take on déjà vus.
Oh, he does something about it?
Yeah. His take is that it's just that you remember the environment and some parts of a previous memory that you have indeed had, but you don't remember all parts of it. And so your brain sort of activates those neurons at the same time by accident. But he says, in my experience, for every time that I've had a déjà vu, I've been able to track down the memory that sort of mapped itself on this present situation, and I actually do remember what caused it. But I mean, I wrote next to it, like, not me. I don't know. I guess I've never tried extensively, but I don't relate to that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Did I explain it well?
I think so. I can't think about this because it would take so much introspection. It would take so much caring about this thing too. Like, again, because I haven't ever done it, maybe he has really like anticipated those moments and set up mechanisms to really measure what's going on for him. But I guess it has been in familiar environments. Sometimes in the bus, sometimes in class.
I'm not sure. I don't remember the time. I've had it like many times, but I don't actually remember.
Well, I have a pretty stable routine, so I'm just anticipating that it's probably...
It was probably in the house, on the way to the bus, in the bus.
Yeah, and at the KFC. So then there's a little bit about forgetting, but I said the interesting thing that it's a blessing and a curse. There's the forgetting curve by
Ebbinghaus,
Dr. Whomever, as entitled by Amine. So, okay. So what has come of all this? Setting up systems, and I do think cognitive laziness can really hurt memory. I mean, I'm sure it's not controversial, but if you don't, it happens a lot for me when I don't want to work out a system that I know could be profitable for my memory. For example, just this, right? I have a few notes saying emotion, thinking, focus, attendance, stuff like that, right? And I said it earlier. I don't want to go through the struggle of like putting emotion and thinking as the two big points. Then above them, in a dimension above, circling these two is focus, right? Like I don't want to set up that system because I'm cognitively lazy right now. But I know that if I did that, just through the fact that I went through the process, just through the fact that I know that it now makes sense, it has internal consistency, and I can think of, okay, focus is the big circle. On the left is thinking, but what else could influence? Oh, right, emotion. I could deduce another element. So this is why systems are so important. And I think they're the most neglected thing in this process as a whole, because if you do take the other approach that William James is advising against, of thinking, memory is memory, I can practice it or I cannot. Ultimately, that's not what it is. And if you were to take specific measures to do the thing that actually matters, which is attend to stimuli more, attend to them in a more quality way, and then organize them, and then try to repeat them multiple times, you would do great strides for your memory. And in fact, I am gonna do these things. Like I'm gonna take notes on
the practical thing. Mainly, like it's just there's no two ways about it, really. There's no shortcut for memory. Like cramming doesn't work, and don't complain if you cram or you do something out of laziness, as you said, and you don't remember as well. The real way of remembering, like if you want to remember something, I think everyone has that capacity. You just need to say, okay, over the next month. Okay, let's that's how long it takes. Let's say over the next month, I'm going to review everything on the first day. Then I have to review on not the next day, the day after. And then you can space them out a bit more every time, but it'll take a month, and that's what it'll take, and it'll take effort, and it'll be worse than just looking at it once and then once before the exam. But you'll see the results also.
Exactly. I think it behaves in quite predictable patterns. And even the things I forget is because ultimately I don't care about what a playground is or stuff like that. It's not important to me.
Yeah, I have a lot of things that I don't remember that I don't mind really not remembering. It just creates funny situations with the people I talk to because I don't know what month comes before what month or
exactly,
like stuff like that. Like
I have to start from January every time.
Yeah.
Cause dumb. That's
Are you saying
beautiful.
doesn't matter? Or are you saying dumb? Dumb.
Doesn't matter. So it's a disrespectful way of saying doesn't matter for everyone who didn't know. Now, I feel like this was more of a disorganized episode. Now, it just feels like we're back in the good old days of not necessarily knowing where we're going, whatever. Anyway, I'd like more structure, and I will work on more structure for next time, but that's okay. Any final practical things? I think we've said them.
I think so. And I'm just thinking about my figured it out rating.
Yeah, but what, that's the thing. Like, I gotta tell myself after all of this, when's the last time I created a system, tried to memorize 10 concepts around the concept that I care about, rehearsed it for a week in a row, and then been fully focused while learning about the concept, and then just woken up one day and said, oh man, I don't remember. Like it's never happened.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. It's so predictable. And you might get frustrated that for the next person over, it takes a week, and for you, it'll take 3 weeks. But that's life.
Yeah.
That's life. And
yeah, but I think the only time you've ever done that with a system of and everything is like,
I mean, I guess philosophy though.
okay, yeah, philosophy.
I've tried to start writing my own book. So 8?
Yeah, I was gonna say 8 exactly because I don't think it's a 9. I don't think we like hit every part, and we couldn't.
Yeah.
Of the texts, and then did everything, but we definitely talked about interesting points.
Could have been a 10 if the episode was 3 hours, I'd say. That's what it was. But I'm glad we finally had an episode on the allegory of the cave, because I do want to maybe implement this metaphor into certain things we're going to be reading, for sure. Okay. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening. It's been the Thinkin Bros. Go to thinkinbros.com to get more information, or contact us at thinkinbros@gmail.com, and we read every feedback.
Every single one.
And I was Chris.
I'm Alex. See ya.